Hi, this is Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video I'm going to be demonstrating some of the finer points of how to make the bunny squish. This is a very simple pattern, so today we'll just be going over the more difficult sections like the ears and the feet. To make this pattern, you'll need your inspirations, Bernat blanket, a 7 or 8 millimeter hook, whichever one gets you gauge, as well as filling, safety eyes and nose, or contrasting colors to sew them on with. I also recommend that you have some stitch markers handy. Finally, you'll want to either make or purchase a pom-pom for this cute fuzzy tail. So let's take a closer look at the bunny squish together. It's made in several parts that are then sewn together, but the main one is the body, which is simply half double crochet worked in spirals. We start out with a flat circle and then come down the sides with a little bit of decreases. Then, after making just a couple rounds of decreases, we want to go ahead and stop and make the bottom because we need to leave an opening there to stuff our bunny with either a micro bead ball, or you could use fiberfill, whatever you want to stuff it with. And before you stuff it and sew on the bottom, you'll want to go ahead and add the safety eyes and safety nose, or sew them on using contrasting yarn if you'd like, and make and sew on the ears. I'd also recommend that you go ahead and put the pom-pom on opposite the face before you sew the bottom on. As I said, the bottom is made in its own separate piece. Again, it starts out just like the top in a half double crochet spiral. Then we make these 4 little feet and add those to the spiral for the last round. And then simply right here, if you look very closely, you can see this row has actually been whip stitched on to the body. So we make the top, then we make the bottom, whip stitch it together, and then it's all done. So let's go over a few of those little trickier bits together. So let's go ahead and make those ears together. Now, normally piece number 1 would be made with color A, which is whipped cream or white color. I'm going to be demonstrating today with blue because it's a little bit easier to see on camera. And of course, you can make your own blue bunny if you like. So for row 1, we're going to start with a chain of 8. So I'll get my slip knot on the hook here. There we are. And then I'm going to go ahead and chain 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Then I'm going to skip the chain closest to the hook and single crochet in the next chain. I do recommend that you work into the back humps of the chain for this piece. So we're going to skip that one closest to the hook and single crochet in the next, going just right under just that back hump there of the chain. So there is our single crochet. Then we double crochet in the next 5 chains. So there's 1, 2, 3. Takes a minute with these great big yarns, but they make great big stitches. So there's 4. And finally, there's 5. Then we are going to single crochet again in that very last chain remaining. Get under just that back loop there. There we are. All right, now we are not going to turn. This is where it gets a little bit goofy, and it's handy to have those stitch markers handy. So I'm going to pull up my stitch markers here, and for what we're going to do is we're going to start round 2 by working a half double crochet in the foundation chain of the last stitch. So we were working across those back humps. This is that last stitch. We worked into this chain right here. So now we're going to basically just keep working right under there. We're going to be going under there, but sort of from the other side here. So we're going to basically be working around. So what we want to do is we want to work a half double crochet in the foundation chain of the last stitch. So right there, basically back in that same stitch. So we've got that little tail end there. We want to just sort of push it out of the way and put a half double crochet right there. Now I'm going to go ahead and put a stitch marker in that half double crochet because that's going to be the first stitch of our second round. Like I say, it's a little goofy, but sometimes when you're making stuffies and amigurumi, you make some different moves here. So there we go. So after we've got that first half double crochet, then we're going to half double crochet in the next 6 foundation chains. So find that next one there. It can be a little tricky with the fuzzy yarn. Just take your time and find the next one. So there's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. There we are. And you can see how it's starting to cup up a little bit there at the bottom. That's great. That's what we want. So now we have half double crocheted across that foundation chain. We are now going to make 3 half double crochets in that turning chain. Basically, when we did our initial chain, it would have been a chain 8, and then we skipped that first chain. That's the one right there now. That right there is where we want to put these 3 half double crochets. We don't normally work into the turning chain, especially for a single crochet. But again, sometimes when you're making a stuffed animal especially, you make some unusual moves. So there's 1 and 2. And I'm actually going to go ahead and put a stitch marker in that second one. And you'll see why here as we come around again. There we are. And then 3. Get that third one right there, right in the turning chain, right in the side, essentially, of that row. Then we're going to half double crochet in the next 7 stitches. So we're working around, all the way around that initial series of 7 stitches. So you kind of have to pull apart there, make sure you're in the right spot here as we start down our side again. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And that should take us right up. The very next stitch is marked. There we are. So that is it for round 2. Now we're ready for round 3 of piece 1 of our ear. So what we're going to do is single crochet in the next 8 stitches. So that very first one right there, go ahead and just work a half double crochet right in there. You'll notice I'm not even bothering to join. Just going to go ahead and get my single crochet right in that first marked stitch. I'll go ahead and take that out. This is our last round, so I don't need to worry about that anymore. So there's 1 single crochet. Let me pull up some more yarn from my ball here. And again, normally this piece would be white or, well, whatever color you want your bunny to be. So there's our first one. Then we've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and this should, unless I missed one somewhere, I may have missed one and miscounted with having to pull up the new yarn. This should take us right up to that marked stitch. So looks like I must have miscounted there. Let's see, we've got our single crochets there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yep, I just somehow managed to miscount, but I do have 8 single crochets. Now you'll see that brings us back to that next marked stitch. We're just going to go ahead and put 3 single crochets right in there. And I'm not going to bother putting that back in again because, as I say, this is our last round for this ear piece here. So there's 2 and 3. And then just single crochet in the next 8 right down this side. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, just a little bit more yarn needed. There we go. And 8. Alrighty, now we're going to go ahead and slip stitch to that first stitch. And then we can break our yarn, but we want to make sure to leave a long tail for sewing. So not a super long tail. We're just going to have to sew it onto the top of our body. So a good 10 inches, maybe a foot will do. Then you can simply pull that end right on through. And now we've got those 2 tail ends, which will help us sew our ear onto our body. But first we want to put that pink part on the inside, and that's piece 2. So piece 2, the inside pink part of the ear, or again, whatever color you want to use, is actually quite a bit simpler than piece 1. We're simply going to start again with our chain of 8. So there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Then we skip the chain closest to the hook and single crochet in the next stitch. Double crochet in the next 5. And again, I'm going under that back hump. I think it just leaves a nicer edge, especially since this bit is only the 1 row. We won't be working around or anything. It's quite a bit simpler than piece 1. So let's see, we've got 2 more double crochets to make. So there's 1 and 2. And then finally we've got 1 chain left here. Yep, so we should half double crochet in that very last chain. Then we're ready to break our yarn for this one. However, we are going to need to sew this to the inside of this one. So we actually need to leave a little bit longer tail on this one, about 2, maybe 3 times as long as the piece itself. That's sort of the rule of thumb I use to always give myself enough room to sew with. So we go ahead and break that yarn, and we can pull that loop on up here. This yarn has a lot of texture. Sometimes it's just easier to do it with your fingers. There we go. And then we can go ahead and use these ends to help sew it in. Okay, so now we're ready to assemble our first ear. And of course you'd make 2 for your bunny, but the key is going to be having a large yarn needle. You want something with a big enough eye to the needle that you can fit the yarn through. With these jumbo yarns, it can be a little tricky sometimes to get that in there. And to get it through a regular yarn needle, you don't want to shred the yarn. So got a nice large yarn needle here with our long end. And basically we're just going to go ahead and lay our inner ear right inside our outer ear, like so. Piece 2 goes right inside piece 1. It's a lot smaller, so that makes sense, right? So now the tricky part for this, if you want to say there's a tricky part, is that you just want to make sure to carefully sew it in so that the pink doesn't show through whatever color you've used for the rest of your bunny. So basically, this is a lot like weaving in ends, but we're just going to go all the way around. So I'd go ahead and go through this stitch, and then I'm going to go ahead and pick up a stitch of the outer ear. And here I can see my needle isn't showing, so that stitch isn't likely to show. Just carefully pull that through there and check. Looks good. So now I will go ahead and come up through my ear, catch some more stitches, come back down into my outer ear, pick up another loop there, make sure it's not going to show, and pull through and stitch that in. Then I can come back up into my inner ear. Got a little bit of fuzz there, and get that out of the way. Let's see here. Must have had a little bit of fuzzy end on the table. Whoops, yep, fuzzy end on the table. It was getting picked up. There we go. So I can go back down into that inner ear, go back into the outer ear, pick up a couple more loops, make sure they're not showing, and hopefully that's giving you the idea here. There we go. We want to just basically keep working all the way around, making sure that it doesn't show too much there through the outer ear. Then when we've gotten all the way around, you can do the same thing with this one and sort of tuck in those ends to weave them in and cut them off. Then we'll be ready to attach our ears to our body. So after you've made the top of the body here and those 2 ears, it's time to take a break and do some assembly. And the first thing to do is sew on those ears. I counted out and put them between rounds 5 and 6. You can see here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then there'd be round 6. So I sort of used that line in between the rows to help me line them up. Other than that, you just want to look at the top and really figure out exactly where you want those 2 to be. Then what I like to do is send those ends through and really just basically tie them on with a bow and double check my placement once they're both on. So let me show you real quick how I do that. Okay, so I've got the ear we made together and a small swatch here that I'm going to use because it's actually a little bit easier to see than trying to show you with the whole body. When you can get up in there, it's a little different than trying to do it on camera. But basically, when I want to check the placement of something like ears, what I do is I take those long tails that we left for sewing. And of course, I've picked out wherever on my bunny body I think that ear should be. Let's say right there is where I think it should be. So I will just go ahead and send those 2 ends down in there, making sure the end that's in front of the ear is on the front of the body and the end that's on the back of the ear is facing the back of the body. Although if you're sewing on the ears first, there isn't really a front or a back yet, so you don't have to worry about that too much. And then you can see, we'll just pull this down here. This is about that far away. So we'll send that in about same distance as it is on the ear. And then I'm going to go ahead and flip it over. And inside the body, like I say, it's kind of hard to show that. So that's why we're using this little swatch here today. I will go ahead and just literally tie it in like a shoelace bow. I don't want to double knot it because I might need to move it yet. But I want to tie it pretty tight to the body there. And then I would do the same thing with the other one. So then I can turn it over and check that placement and really look at that body, maybe even go ahead and stuff it a little bit so you can make sure that ear is right where you want it to be. Then when it's time to sew it on, you can go ahead and just take that bow out, leave that knot if you want to and add a second knot to make it extra secure, and then just go ahead and weave in your ends as you normally would. Okay, so after you've got your ear sewn on, then you know which part's going to be the front and which part's going to be the back. So the next step is to add the eyes and nose. I used safety eyes and nose, both linked in the pattern, so you can go ahead and follow the link in the description or go to the Bunny Squish on mooglyblog.com to get the links to those. And then, of course, opposite the face, you'll need to go ahead and add a pom, whether it's a faux fur pom or you could, make one out of yarn. However you want to do it is fine. For me, I placed the eyes between rounds 13 and 14, counting down from the top. You can see right there, I just kind of spaced them right between those two rows, left about, I believe it was 7 or so stitches in between. You can just eyeball it and see what you like. And then the ear, or rather not the ear, but the nose was just one row down then right between those two eyes. And again, I used safety nose and eyes, but if you'd like, you can use a bit of black yarn, pink yarn, whatever you'd like to sew on your own custom face. And then right there, we've got the pom-pom, and this pom-pom is sewn to round 14, sort of make it balance that face. After you've got all that put together, then it's time to set aside the body, and all we have left to do is make the bottom. So the next step is to make the feet, and of course we need 4. So to make each one, we start with a magic circle. So I take the yarn and I wind it over my finger here twice towards me. Then I'm going to insert my hook under both of those loops, grab the first one with my hook, bring it just underneath the edge of the first one, and do a quick chain there. Basically, that just holds the ring together. Then I'll go back to my instructions and start with a chain 1, and then a half double crochet right into the ring. And when we work into the ring here, we want to make sure we go under that loop and that tail end there. So both pieces. I'll go ahead and get my finger out of there. With big, thick yarn like this, you can pull your finger out a little earlier than you can with some of those thinner yarns. There we go. So there is our half double crochet. Then we single crochet. Then we're going to work 2 half double crochets. 1 and 2. Again, we want to make sure to go in the ring and over that tail with each of these stitches. Then single crochet again, and then half double crochet. There we are. Now, just like the other parts of this pattern, anytime we're working in the round, we're usually working in a spiral. So I want to make sure to go ahead and mark that very first stitch I made, that very first single crochet back here. Get my stitch marker under those top 2 loops there. And then, since we don't need to slip stitch, we're going to go ahead and just pull on that tail end and just take your time and pull gently until it is all the way closed. Sometimes it helps to sort of stabilize it with your other hand there as you pull. There we are. So it's nice and tight, and now we can continue with round 2 of our feet. So for round 2, we're going to start with 2 half double crochets in that very first stitch. So again, we want to go into that very first single crochet we made. And now I'm going to go ahead and move that stitch marker out of the way, and I'll be putting it in this first half double crochet. So there we are. So there's the first one. So I want to go ahead and mark that. Otherwise, when you're working in a spiral, it can be very difficult, or very easy rather, to lose your place. Very difficult to keep track. So there's one, and there's our second one. Then we're going to single crochet in the next stitch. Make sure we're not getting too far in there. There we go. Single crochet in the next stitch, 2 half double crochet in each of the next 2 stitches. So there's 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. Then we single crochet in the next stitch and finish with 2 half double crochets in the next stitch, the last one there before the marked stitch. So there's 1 for there and 2. You can see it's cupping up on me right now. That's fine. That's what we want it to do. We just want it to go the other way. So if you want to at this point, you can go ahead and weave in that end. I would definitely recommend you do it at the end of the next row if you don't do it now, but for our demo purposes here, I'm just going to go ahead and tuck it in so that now we're working from the outside of our little foot here. So now we are ready for round 3. Round 3 begins with 2 half double crochets in that first stitch. And there's 4 rounds total. So again, we do want to move that stitch marker up. So there's our first one. We'll go ahead and put our stitch marker in this stitch. Then we need to get a second half double crochet in there. Alrighty, then half double crochet in the next stitch. Single crochet in the stitch after that. Half double crochet in the next stitch. 2 half double crochets in each of the next 2 stitches. So there's 1 and 2. And then 1 and 2 for the second one. Then we half double crochet in the next stitch. Single crochet in the stitch after that. Half double crochet in the next stitch. And then 2 half double crochets in that very last stitch before our stitch marker. So there is 1 and 2. There we are. Okay, so now if you haven't taken the time to weave in that first end, now is definitely the time to do it. And anytime you use a magic circle, I recommend that you weave it in a couple different directions. That'll help keep that closed. For demo purposes, we're just going to go ahead and stuff that right in. And we don't need to stuff these feet, by the way. They're just worked with these 2 layers. And this last part, it's actually row 4, is going to go ahead and close it up. So you can go ahead and leave that little end in there. You don't have to cut it off if you don't want to. So now we're ready to move from rounds to rows and make row 4. Now row 4 is a little different. We're not going to just work across and not join or anything. What we're actually going to do is flatten our foot at this point. I'm going to go ahead and pull that loop up a little bit. And we want to basically just squish it right here. You can see our first stitch and last stitch are right here. So we just want to squish it down flat. That's what we've been doing all those different size stitches for, is to create this shape. So now I'm going to put my hook right back in that loop there. And what we're going to do is single crochet through the next stitch and the last stitch, which is right behind it. We're going to work right across, working through both of those layers to create one line of a total of 6, it would be a total of 7 stitches across, because we've got 14 stitches now, so we're going to turn them into 7. So what we want to do is go right in that first marked stitch. We can go ahead and get rid of that stitch marker because it's our last row. And then, and this part can be a little tricky, we want to make sure we get right back under that last stitch we just made as well. After this, it gets a bit easier. There we go. So once you're through the first and last stitch of the previous round, go ahead and pull our yarn through both of those and simply single crochet. From here, it gets a lot easier. We find the next one on this side, and then the next one right behind it. Go through both of those and make your single crochet. And then we just continue on across, so that at the end, we should have a total of 7 single crochets. You can see worked right across there. This will allow us to attach our feet to the bottom of our bunny. So when you get to those last 2, it can be a little tricky again, kind of like those first 2. You basically just want to get your hook in there as best you can, get under those 2 stitches there, pull up your loop, and then you've got your single crochet. So you should have a total of 7 single crochets through both of those layers. So now we've got 1 flat little foot. So then after that, you do need to make 3 more. Now, when it's time to break this end, you don't have to worry about sewing it onto anything. We're actually going to be crocheting it onto the bottom. So you can go ahead and just finish it off like you normally would, and either weave in that end or just leave it hanging here for now. After you've got your 4 feet made, then it's time to make the belly. And the first few rounds of the belly are just like the body. You're working with your main color in a spiral, making a flat circle. Then at the end of round 5, you need to place your feet around that circle. Now I know this isn't a circle, but it's what we're using today as our stand-in. So after you've got that circle made through round 5, what you need to do is follow the instructions to attach each of those feet to the different portions of the circle. And I've given you the exact stitch numbers to attach them to on your circle. But I just recommend that you take your stitch markers and attach them to those stitches. And you can match up and say make sure you've got 7 on back there to match up with your 7 of each of those feet. Let me get that last one there. So we'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There we go. Make sure I'm counting that right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yes. Okay. So once you've got all of your feet lined up on your round 5, just like this. This is the right side. This is the side I'd be crocheting towards me. We want to go ahead and put our feet right on top of it, just like this. So then when we do round 7, we'll be crocheting through both of these layers. So I'll go ahead and demo how that works here. Now, as I say in the pattern, normally this would already be attached because I would have just made through round 5 and left my yarn attached. But we're just demonstrating some of these finer points today. So I'm going to go ahead and just sort of attach this here at the corner. And then round 6 of our belly is half double crochet, which is what we do all our spiraling in this pattern. So there's 1. And then when I come to that stitch, you can see right there, that's the stitch it's attached to. I want to make sure that I go through first the foot stitch there. I'm going to go ahead and get that stitch marker out of the way. It's getting in the way right now. It did its job. And then come back here and get that next stitch of the belly and make our half double crochet through both of those layers. And then you just continue to do that on around for round 6, increasing as instructed. There are increases still because we're still basically making a flat circle. We're just now working through both feet and our belly stitches when we come to those feet. So you can see we just work right through both of those layers. And of course you would continue on around and do this for all of those feet. And again, as I say, there would be increases in our circle. But I just want to show how that attaches. There we are. And then of course you continue on around till you got to your other feet, until you got all the way around for round 6. And then you finished up with round 7 and we're ready to attach it to the body. So see, here you can see those 4 little feet, and I've worked that 6th round of the belly through both of those layers for that piece. After you've finished off the belly, we leave a long tail, and then you simply whip stitch that belly right onto your body after, of course, you've finished stuffing it. So we've got all the bits on the outside for the body, we stuff it, and then we whip stitch on the belly. Whip stitching is pretty simple. I'm going to demo again with our handy little swatch here. What you want to do is cut a length of the white yarn or whatever you're using for your color A, and then we'll go ahead and get it on the needle here. Now we would take our bottom, and I do want to point out you may need to turn it a little bit and line it up so that your feet are nicely lined up with your face. You want those, feet on either side of your face. You can adjust that as needed. And then when you've got it all lined up and attached with your stitch markers, then you can simply take those 2 layers and whip stitch them together. You can go up through a stitch of the bottom of the belly there, right along that last round, and then right into the bottom, or rather the top of the last stitch of the body. And just go all the way around with a whip stitch, which is simply just like that. That's why they call it the whip stitch. You're sort of just whipping right around those stitches. And of course you do it in the matching color, still in your belly, the long tail from the belly. So it will blend in a lot better than the blue on teal will. Oops. All right, right there is the one thing to work about. You might end up accidentally going over the whole project, so you have to pull it out. There we go. But yeah, just whip stitch that on. Again, get a real big close-up of it right there. You can just see where I've sewn the belly and the body together. And that's how to crochet the Bunny Squish, which is a free pattern you'll find on mooglyblog.com. Please again go to the link in the description where you will find both the right and left-handed video tutorials as well as links to all the supplies you need. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.